The starry Arizona sky was captured in the windshield as the rest of the state sped by. There were no tail lights ahead, and the nearest headlights merged into a single point in the rearview mirror. Jack enjoyed the clear views and straight desert roads. He knew that soon the moonrise would hide the stars, so he peered over the steering wheel to commit them to memory. Ancient volcanic cones approached from both sides of the road as his thoughts drifted to his now ex-wife. He remembered the day he found her in their bed with Peter. She said it wasn't what it seemed and that she didn't do anything wrong. She asked how he could not trust her after all these years and pretended that the whole mess was his fault. Just thinking about it raised his blood pressure and blocked the beauty of the night sky from his consciousness. He pushed the feelings of betrayal and anger aside, switched off, and just drove. Out of the darkness, two dim taillights appeared on the side of the road. One of them blinked, then blinked again. The deep yellow light of the flashlight on its last breath caught his attention. He slowed down to see a woman waving her arms in frustration as he drove by. He stopped and then reversed toward her car. The woman ran to the passenger window. "Could you help me?" she begged. "I can't install the spare tire. I'm sure it will be easy for you." There was a desperation in her voice that Jack couldn't resist. He parked his car behind hers so his headlights illuminated the empty rear passenger wheel well. Her car was an old Ford Falcon. It was in good condition for a car that was over 50 years old, but apparently not good enough. Jack raised the spare tire to the hairpins. "It's a spare tire from another car, isn't it?" "This is problem." She looked over his shoulder as Jack showed her that the holes in the wheel were half an inch further than the studs on the brake drum. He looked at her for the first time in the headlights. She was wearing a vintage dress. Horn-rimmed glasses framed her dark eyes, and deep red lipstick highlighted her lips. Her dark hair was styled as if she and her clothes and car belonged in the early 1960s. The woman herself was young, probably about 25 years old. He looked at her and said, "You need to put a good wheel on a good wheel. My sister lives in Quartzsite. It's very close." Jack checked his phone and found that there was no signal. "We can't call her, but I can give you a ride if you want." He turned off her car's parking lights while she thought. He is used to helping people. It was the right thing to do, and he loved the way it made him feel. She considered her situation. Jack was the only one who stopped in the 5 hours she spent on the side of the road. His help was her only option. "Please give me a ride," she said. They placed the flat tire, spare tire, and her bags in the back of his truck. Jack opened the passenger door and extended his hand to help her in. "Please don't touch me," she said. She sat down, pressing her knees together and pressing her side against the door. Her hands clutched the purse she held in her lap. She looked straight ahead. "Where are you from?" Jack thought maybe talking would help her relax. "From Chicago." "You drove all the way from Chicago in that Falcon?" "Yes." After a couple of monosyllabic answers, he gave up trying to keep the conversation going. They spent the next 15 minutes listening to the sound of the road rushing past. Jack turned off the highway into Quartzsite and stopped at a gas station. "Do you want to call your sister?" Now, after 23 years, she found herself at a gas station in an unfamiliar city and without money. Her mind searched for options, but there were none. They ended before she left Chicago. Desperation led her to ask her sister for help, and then her sister stopped answering her calls. She didn't need to call to know that her sister wouldn't answer right now. She called anyway, waited, and then said, "She's not picking up." In the light of the gas pumps, Jack saw that her left eye was blue and swollen from a recent blow. There was a noticeable pale yellow stain on the right cheek from an earlier bruise. On her left hand was tattooed, "Fuck you, not me," and on her right, "Crucify your offender." He saw her hide her hands behind her back. The signs of her abuse made him even more sympathetic to her plight. "I can give you a ride to your sister's house if you want." Her sister lived in a double-wide trailer south of town. She knocked on the door, but the light was off and no one answered. Jack knocked on the next trailer, where the elderly winterers were still watching TV. He asked if they knew anything about their neighbors. They left a couple of weeks ago. It's been quieter around here since then. You don't know where they went? They didn't say. We weren't friends with them. They quarreled all the time. There was no point in staying here, so they returned to the city in the truck. Jack was trying to figure out what to do with this girl. He couldn't just leave her at a gas station, and the town didn't look like there were many social services. He thought about the tattoos on her arms and the easy women he saw on the streets of Los Angeles. This girl was on a slippery slope with no easy way out. They stopped at a McDonald's next to a gas station. "Do you want anything?" he asked. She shook her head. He bought 2 combos and then joined her at the table. He ate a few bites of one burger and then said, "I guess I'm not as hungry as I thought. Would you like that?" He pushed the tray with another combo towards her. She didn't like being pitied, but she was hungry and she knew he was trying to be kind. While she ate, she studied her benefactor. He was about 38. He was quite attractive and quite athletic. He wore a long-sleeved shirt and cargo pants, probably purchased from the outdoor section. His truck was an old SUV, loaded with camping gear and covered in mud. She thought he was returning from camping, but who goes camping alone? She tried to understand what he wanted in return for his help. Even though he seemed harmless enough, he would still want something because everyone wants something. After she finished eating, he asked, "What are your plans?" She had plans before. She planned to stay with her sister for a couple of months, save some money, and then rent her own apartment. Now she had a couple of bags of personal belongings, a pile of junk in her car, stranded 21 miles east of town, and 2 useless tires. Her wallet contained about $27 and several offensive tattoos on her arms. "I think my only good option is to marry you." He laughed. "I don't even know your name." "I'm Catherine," she said, holding out her hand. Jack shook her hand and said, "I'm honored that you chose me to hate for the rest of your life." After they laughed, he said, "Seriously, what are you going to do? Do you mean tomorrow or for the rest of your life? Let's start with tonight. Where are you going to sleep?" Her heart sank at the question. It was already late, and more it seemed that she would sleep with this stranger. He went through similar thoughts. It was almost midnight. If he leaves now, he won't get home until 4 in the morning. He imagined how he would stay conscious, irritating himself with thoughts of his ex-wife and her lover, but he had already punished himself enough. He also felt an obligation to help Catherine, not because he owed her anything. It was just that the task of helping was unfinished, and he had to see it through to completion. She needed a place to sleep, which meant he needed to find a room. There were only a few motels in the city. The 2 they saw from McDonald's had "no rooms available" signs lit up, but they went in to talk to one of the receptionists anyway. Jack asked, "Do you know where we could rent a room?" "Sorry, we're pretty busy. There's a gem show going on this week, so it's pretty busy everywhere." Jack checked the map on his phone, looking for the nearest town with a motel, while the receptionist scrolled through something on her computer. She said, "I have one room that might be suitable. They checked out late, so the maid didn't have time to clean up. I'll give it to you if you make the bed yourself." Jack said, "I guess we'll take it." The receptionist checked them in, then brought out clean linen and towels. She gave the room keys to Jack and the towels and linen to Catherine. Catherine weighed the sheets and then asked, "How many beds are there in the room?" "Only one royal one. Is that a problem?" Catherine gave Jack a scared look. Jack asked, "We're not married. Is there a bed here for one of us to sleep on?" "Sorry, everything's falling apart." On the short walk from the front desk to the room, Jack said, "Don't worry. I'll sleep on the couch or the floor or something." Catherine wondered if this guy was actually real. She knew there were a lot of good people in the world, but they never stopped on the highway after dark. She looked around the room and then said, "We should both just sleep in the bed, but please don't touch me, okay?" Jack agreed. He crawled under the covers in shorts and a t-shirt and fell asleep within minutes. Catherine wore a vintage nightgown that was sexy without being provocative. She lay down under the covers and thought about her financial situation, the whereabouts of her sister, and the fate of her car. She thought about everything she knew about Jack. Was he as cute as he seemed? He treated her like a damsel in distress, which was much better than being treated like the cheap bitch she had become in Chicago. She didn't want to be like that anymore. The heater in the room gradually warmed the air. Catherine, the memories of her sex surfaced against her will from the grave in which she tried to bury them. She began to sweat, and her breathing became shallow as a wave of anxiety washed over her. She needed to get out of the room. She quickly changed her clothes, grabbed her purse, and quietly closed the door. Jack woke up the next morning and found himself alone. Catherine's luggage was still on the floor, her toiletries were still by the sink, and her nightgown was hanging on the chair. He slowly showered, shaved, and got dressed. He was watching the local news from Phoenix and otherwise lingering in the room. He called the front desk to inquire about the messages and checked the cash and cards in his wallet. On his slow walk to breakfast, he noticed that Falcon's tires were still in the back of his truck. After breakfast, he fixed the tires and killed time in his motel room. At noon, he loaded her things into his truck and checked out of the room. While he was leaving, he asked the receptionist if she had seen a girl with offensive tattoos on her arms. No, but the police wanted to know if anyone had asked about the missing girl. The police station was a sand-colored building on a sandy lot. Jack asked the officer behind the desk if he knew anything about Catherine. "Is that the girl with the fuck you tattoo on her arm?" "Yes, probably." The judge thought she was a flight risk, so the bail was set quite high. The deposit was within reach of Jack's credit cards. Damn it. What charges? For trafficking in sexual services, possession of a controlled substance, and resisting arrest. The trading of services did not match what Jack knew about Catherine, but resisting arrest was likely. What substances? Weed. This isn't Colorado, you know, the cop said. Catherine's mood was gloomy. The ratchet addict in the cell with her gave a grim foreboding of her future. She signed some documents and packed her purse. She was surprised to see Jack, but glad he was still around. They drove east to her car. She watched from inside his truck as he installed a tire, lowered the jack, and put tools in her trunk. She felt like she was crossing the finish line of a race that was long over. She got out of the truck and said, "We're wasting time. I don't have enough money for gas, and I don't have a place to go even if I had money." The sun was shining brightly, but the air was cool. Jack squatted down and went over his morning thoughts in his head. He said, "And you don't trust me." "No, it's not about trust." "So what do you want to do?" "Can I stay with you until I get back on my feet?" Jack felt relieved. He was afraid that she would ask for money. He needed the bail money back so he could keep an eye on her. He filled her tank at Quartzsite, and then she followed him to his Los Angeles apartment. His apartment was smaller and less comfortable than she expected. Shifted boxes filled the living room. The walls were bare, and the refrigerator was almost empty. She showered, then took a nap and woke up to the smell of soup and grilled sandwiches. "What happened to your apartment?" "I just got divorced a couple of months ago. I haven't had a chance to straighten things out." "How long have you been married?" 7 years. I think she cheated on me with the last 2, so they weren't very good. But it took me a while to figure out why." "Did you know this guy?" "Yes, it was my friend." "How do you know?" "I suspected something was going on. The evidence kept piling up until I caught them in bed. I didn't want to believe it was true, but it was." Jack swallowed a spoonful of soup and then asked, "What's your story?" She held out her hands. "Does this give you any clues?" Jack took her hands. He ran his finger over the word abuser and then asked, "How old were you?" "Too young." "Was it before the bruises?" Catherine nodded. "Do you have any other relatives besides your sister?" Catherine shook her head and Jack stopped asking questions. Catherine got a job as a waitress in a retro diner. She showed up for the interview looking the part and was hired on the spot. She worked as many shifts as she could and saved her money. Jack equipped her room with the necessary equipment and installed a lock on the door. She insisted it wasn't necessary, but kissed him on the cheek when he finished. She hung some pictures, unpacked boxes, and tried to make the house more comfortable. Their schedules rarely coincided, but when they had free time together, he showed her what he could from Los Angeles. They visited Venice Beach and the Getty Museum, saw the Hollywood plaque, and walked along the Walk of Fame. In the depths of her soul, she felt her ascent through the hierarchy of needs. She no longer had to worry about where she would sleep or what she would eat, and she no longer felt worried about her safety. She even began to feel like she belonged here. The girls at the diner accepted her as one of their own, and Jack treated her like a wild cat that he patiently tamed. She knew she could easily take advantage of Jack. He provided her with free housing, kept food in the cupboards, and didn't ask many questions. She might have been greedy in Chicago, but that didn't seem right here and now. The bitterness that once consumed her subsided. It was almost as if she was happy. They returned to court site the day before her trial. Her lawyer offered to plead guilty to the possession of a substance charge and not guilty to the sex trafficking and resisting charges. He advised her to wear a short-sleeved shirt and pray for mercy from the court. Catherine made a reservation and checked them into the motel. Jack said, "Hey, it's the same number as last time." "This is true. But there's only one bed." Catherine smiled and said, "And I only have one night. Tomorrow I could end up behind bars." After Jack set down his luggage, Catherine turned to face him and asked, "Why have you never tried to kiss me?" "You said you didn't want me to touch you." "That was the first night. It's been almost 2 months. You've had a lot of opportunities. Do you want to know the real reason?" "Tell." "It wouldn't be fair. When you kiss me, I want it to be because you want it, not because you feel indebted. I want you to be an independent woman, master of your own destiny. I want you to kiss me for who I am, not for what I have done for you." She raised her head and kissed him on the lips. "Don't you want to be the white knight who saves the lady and falls in love?" He ran his fingers through her hair and said, "No one can save you but yourself. You don't think you saved me that night? I got you out of trouble." Jack took her hand. He lifted her hand and lightly traced her tattoos with his finger. "This is your prison. All I can do is stand outside and hope that you find a way to me." She kissed him again. Her tongue penetrated his lips as he held her close to him. She pushed him away. "What if I never fully break out of my prison?" He kissed her forehead. "I don't think you'll ever be completely free of the emotional scars, but I don't want you to hate me in 5 or 7 years. She undid the top button of his shirt. "I'm not the only person in this room with emotional scars, and I'm not going to wait for them to fully heal." Jack smiled and kissed her. Their tongues mingled in her mouth and then in his. He pulled away and asked, "What happened the last time we were in this room together?" "I didn't know you, and I wasn't ready." "Are you ready now?" "Almost, but I have rules. You can't do anything that reminds me of my abuser. I want you to lie down on the bed and let me take control. Don't touch me unless I ask you to. Don't tell me if I won't tell you, and don't moan. No matter what happens, don't moan." "Got it, don't moan." Catherine slowly undid the second button on his shirt. "Why did you stop that night?" "It was the right decision." "Yes, but hundreds of people drove by. Why did you stop?" She undid the next button while she waited for his answer. "I think because the person I want to be always stops. He never rushes. He makes time for people. He always stops." She undid the last button and removed his shirt, running her fingers through his chest hair. "It would probably be easier to dream of becoming an astronaut or a president. Yes, sometimes I get completely lost." She hooked her thumbs into his pants and pulled them down. "Well, you're going to be a total mess tonight, that's for sure." "I hope you mean it literally." "Of course," she said as she pushed him to fall onto the bed. While he lay naked on the bed, she undressed and then slowly put on her vintage lingerie. The bra pressed tightly against her breasts, and her panties rose almost to her navel. She took her time securing the dark stockings to the garters. She raised her hands and turned to him. Like? Very. She went to the bathroom and came back with deep red lipstick. She applied it casually, looking into the mirror where he could watch. She fixed her hair and then examined herself in the mirror. When she was satisfied, she put on a pair of long black gloves. She looked into his eyes as she touched her gloved index finger to the tip of his big toe. Her gaze held him as her finger slid down his foot and up his leg. "I want you to tell me something." She paused, intensifying her gaze on him. "I want to know your kryptonite." "I'm not Superman," was all he could come up with. "Every man has his kryptonite. I need to know yours." He knew what she wanted, but he didn't want to tell her. He froze. She sat on the bed and playfully touched the tip of his nose. "Would you like to play?" "I want to play." "Then tell me something about yourself that no one else knows." "What exactly?" "Tell me why your wife left." "I thought we already discussed this." "You told me how, but you didn't say why." "She started an affair. He offered her something I couldn't. I don't know." He pretended not to understand. "Tell me more." "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because you are closed. You stop on the side of the road, drive me through the desert, give me a place in a motel, and let me live in your house, but you don't share yourself or tell me why. I want to know why." "Come on, Jack, I want to know the real you." That's what Tess said. She said she never knew the real me. "Is Tess your wife?" "Yes." "Did you love her?" "Certainly." "Why did you let her go?" "By the time she left, I had no choice." "Did she betray you?" "Of course we were married." "No, I mean metaphorically. Did she betray you?" She stopped playing and stood looking into his eyes, waiting for an answer. "Yes, she betrayed me." "How many girls have betrayed you?" "Stop it." "Why do you let them betray you?" "Someday I'll meet a girl who won't betray me. When that happens, it will be worth it." That was enough for Catherine. She took off her panties and climbed on top of him, and they started having sex. "Hold me and hold me tight." They lay in silence for a few moments, then she said, "This will give me something to look forward to while I'm in prison." Jack pondered what had happened. He maintained his code for 2 months while they lived together, and then somehow failed catastrophically overnight. Was it a failure? If anything had changed, she now knew she could trust him. The next morning, Catherine wore a vintage sleeveless dress, something in the style that Jackie Onassis might have worn during her Kennedy days. She and her lawyer left Jack in the courtroom as they approached the judge, who turned out to be a woman. The policeman described how he stopped Catherine as she walked alone at night. He decided that she was doing illegal sexual acts, based on her provocative tattoos. She resisted arrest and marijuana was later found in her bag. The judge studied Catherine closely as the policeman spoke. When he finished, she said, "Show me those tattoos." After examining the tattoos, she spoke quietly with Catherine, then asked her lawyer to join them at the bench. They talked for a few minutes. Catherine pointed to Jack, and then they talked some more. The judge said, "Carl, did you read these tattoos before you made the arrest?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Read them again." While he was reading, she asked, "Do these tattoos look more like they're on the hands of an easily accessible girl or someone who survived a brutal attack?" Carl replied, "I must have read them wrong, Your Honor." The judge thanked the officer, then acquitted Catherine of the charges illicit sex and resistance, but found her guilty of possession of marijuana. The judge called Jack to the bench. "I understand that Catherine lives with you." "I gave her a room." The judge nodded, then said, "I would like to put her on probation, but would prefer not to force her to live in Arizona. Are you willing to report to her correctional officer for the next 6 months? He will want you to confirm her location and activities on a weekly basis. This is a big responsibility. Are you ready for it?" Catherine looked at him hopefully. What could he say? He wasn't about to give up now. After all he'd done to help her become independent, so he did the only thing he could and agreed to her terms. After this, it was necessary to iron out a few technical details regarding Jack's background, employment, and financial situation. Once the court was satisfied that Jack had the means to support Catherine, they met with a correctional officer and worked out the details of their new arrangement. It was already late in the afternoon when they went home. Catherine closed the truck door and smiled. "You are attached to me. I think it would be more accurate to say that you are attached to me." She couldn't believe her luck. Yesterday, she thought she would end up in prison. Today, she found out that she has 6 more months with her white knight. Plus, the sex was wonderful. It wasn't like he was doing anything special, but he was playing by her rules, and that was what she needed most, at least for now. Jack thought about the last 2 months as they drove. He couldn't remember a single decision or choice that could change his current situation. Driving past Catherine as she waved on the side of the road was not an option. He helped people, it was part of him. After that, the dominoes began to fall. He couldn't leave her at a gas station, at his sister's trailer, or at the police station. Now he had her for the next 6 months. Will 6 months turn into a year? Will they spend their entire lives together? Jack looked at her as she looked at him. She said, "I can't believe how lucky I am. I'm happy for you." "Aren't you happy for us?" "I'm happy, but I'm also worried that I won't be able to be what you need." "I don't understand." He touched her hand lightly and said, "I think you understand." The silence of their trip was broken by a phone call. "Hello," Jack replied via the car's Bluetooth. "Hi, Jack, it's Mary." Jack and Mary exchanged pleasantries. Catherine was able to realize that Mary was a mutual friend between Jack and his ex. She was throwing a party and wanted Jack to come, even though Tess and Peter would be there too. Mary said, "I didn't hear back from you, so I thought I'd remind you." Catherine's eyes lit up. She nodded vigorously and silently whispered, "Let's go." Jack shook his head. Mary continued, "Tess promises to behave. She really wants to see you." Catherine took the lead, speaking directly into the Bluetooth. "Can he give you the date?" "Are you with someone?" Jack shook his head at Catherine while he said, "Yeah, we're just getting back from Arizona. Mary will have something to discuss with the girls." "I didn't know you were with someone." "We live together," Catherine interjected. Jack shuddered at the thought of the storm that Catherine was unleashing. Mary was a little embarrassed. "Of course, bring your girlfriend." After a few more pleasantries, the conversation ended. "Oh my God, what have you done?" He really didn't want to see Tess. Catherine studied the profile of Jack's face as he drove. "What happened to your ex-wife?" This question made Jack uncomfortable. "I really don't want to talk about my ex." They listened to the radio the rest of the way. The next day, Catherine scoured vintage clothing stores to find the right outfit for Mary's party. She's back with something Audrey Hepburn might have worn in Roman Holiday. It had the long sleeves she needed, but was short enough to show off her legs. She found matching high heels that accentuated her calves without drawing attention away from her legs. She completed the look with a hat and a pair of white gloves. She persuaded Jack to wear a retro suit with a thin tie, and they set off together in her Falcon, ready to travel through time and space to conquer Jack's friends. By the time they arrived, the party was in full swing. Catherine grabbed Jack's hand and allowed him to lead her inside. She straightened up into a perfectly straight posture and imitated the gait she had seen in her favorite Hepburn films. The only thing missing was a long smoking pipe. The party took place in a bar. There were about 20 small tables arranged around the bar counter. A few empty tables were pushed into quiet corners. Most people were standing and talking. Some couples sat at tables, and a group of people occupied the bar. The lights were dim, and there was live music playing. Jack recognized about half the faces. He realized that most of those he knew about Tess's affair long before he himself knew. He felt his confidence drain. "Look at me and smile," Catherine said. As he tried to smile, she said, "Is there one woman in this room you'd rather be with? Look around you." Jack saw Tess, Mary, and several other acquaintances. A couple he vaguely remembered stopped to say hello. He waved to a few other friends, then led Catherine towards the bar, continuing to look around the room. "Well, everyone is looking at you," he said. There was no mystery why. She looked amazing. "Only one person here is important to me." This time he smiled at her for real. While Jack was standing in line for drinks, a young guy came up to meet Catherine. He complimented her outfit and started talking about how boring the party was. Once he was secure, his three friends joined him. They chatted, laughed, and tried to outdo each other with stories of their adventures. Catherine supported them with her glances, smiles, and laughter. By the time Jack returned with the drinks, the group around Catherine had become the center of the party, at least for the young people. Jack held the drinks above his head as he made his way through the crowd surrounding Catherine. He got a few angry looks from the young stallions he had pushed out, but Catherine had pulled him in with her. The conversation has jumped from fashion to cocktails and on to social media. Jack came up for air as the group began exchanging usernames on each of the endless social media apps. Tess pounced on him as soon as he emerged from the group. As always, she was dressed too smartly. She wore a steel gray suit that left most of her long legs exposed. Her silver hair was neatly combed to the side and cut to fit her strong jaw. Her ears, neck, and wrists were decorated with diamonds. Her neat smile seemed warm and calculating at the same time. She reproached him for his lack of communication and said that they had something very important to discuss. She took his hand and led him to a table in a secluded corner. Tess sat down opposite him, crossing her legs. She positioned herself so that her position blocked his exit. She gently took his hand, placed it on her knee, and ran her finger along the veins. She switched to her soft, soothing voice, "It's good to see you again." Jack couldn't understand why he got excited every time she spoke in that voice. He shifted in his seat and tried to prepare himself for her upcoming attack. "Aren't you happy to see me?" she asked. Her blue eyes demanded an answer. "Always good to see you. How's Peter these days?" He tried to take control of the conversation. "Peter is the same Peter. He will never be you." She tilted her head as she said this. Jack marveled at her ability to play on his deep-seated desire to please her. She squeezed his hand in hers and said, "I need to talk to you. Can you help me?" She asked for help. Jack couldn't say no more than he could fly. "You know I didn't mean to hurt you, didn't I?" "How can you say that? You cheated. What could be more offensive?" She squeezed his hand, then ran her hand up his arm to his leg. She looked him in the eye and said, "You know, I did this for you." Jack was confused. Her touch distracted him, and her words made no sense. "You have to admit, our marriage has become a little stale. Don't get me wrong, you've always been good, but we could be better. I've learned that some men like you have a hard time in traditional relationships. You need more. You need to be a white knight who fights for his princess." "Did you think I wanted to fight for you?" "Of course I thought so, but you failed me." Jack just looked at her. "You were my brave prince. You always came to my aid, but when I needed you most, you were not there." Somehow her cheating became his fault, and she was disappointed in him. He was seized with an instinctive desire to escape, but was driven into a corner. Tess sensed his panic and calmed him with her hands and soothing voice. Her gentle touch and smooth voice opened his mind to her strange, twisted logic. "Jack, I want you to come back. Everything I did for you. I thought it would make you happy. But how could you think that I wanted you to be with someone else? Jack, you practically made me do it. I know you knew about it from the beginning, and I also know you loved it." Jack shook his head. It just wasn't true. Although he knew she was distorting reality, she knew exactly how to break his will and shake his resolve. He felt his will begin to crumble. "I miss you and I need you. Won't you come back?" Jack was afraid that he was lost. In a few moments, he will be under her spell again. Catherine saw Tess leading Jack away. She ruled out direct intervention. Her 2-month relationship couldn't compare to 7 years of marriage, no matter how ugly the divorce was. She decided that the best defense was a good attack, and found Peter, who was alone at the bar. Peter was a big guy. He was about the same age as Jack, but he was 4 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. He was wearing dark blue trousers and a sports jacket. His hair was freshly cut, and his hair was liberally applied. Catherine stood close enough to be unavoidable, but she didn't look his way. The bartender handed Peter a drink, took her Manhattan order, and left. "What is such a sophisticated lady doing in this crowd of young people?" He waved his hand towards her group. She smiled enticingly and asked, "Who should I associate with?" "You need someone with experience and maturity, someone with a gentle hand who can guide and caress you." "Wow, sounds like I could really learn a lot from you." She turned her shoulders towards him, captured his gaze, and made him the center of her universe. They really could. "Do you mind if I write this down? It looks like it might be interesting." She picked up the phone to record his response. "Of course. Write it down so my wisdom can be preserved and appreciated." "You said." "Oh, yes, of course. I said that a beautiful, sophisticated woman like you should be associated with someone like me. Instead of taking you to such a boring meeting as this, I would take you to the farthest corners of the earth. We would dine on the most exquisite delicacies and drink the most excellent wine." He pointed his finger at himself and said, "I would show you how to live." "And sex? Would we have sex?" "Oh, my dear, sex with me is unbeatable. These young men would do nothing but jump on top of you. I would show you the joy and pleasure of sensual love. Once you sleep with me, you will never want to sleep with me again. Someone else." Catherine almost felt sorry for this poor, vain idiot, but she continued to write. Tess felt no pity. She wanted to keep Jack under her control, and she was going to keep him under control. She stroked the side of his face and waited until his will obeyed. He was created to be exploited, and she was created to be exploited. Nothing could change that. A sudden burst of laughter and cheers interrupted Tess' thoughts. She looked out into the bar to see what had people watching, but no one was looking at the televisions. All the young people were looking at their phones. Will they ever live in the real world? She turned to Jack, who was also looking at his phone. She was about to yell at him when Mary interrupted her. "Tess, you better get Peter away from this girl." Mary told Tess to go. Jack followed the instructions Catherine had texted him and headed straight to her car. "What the hell happened?" Jack asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. "I was going to ask you the same thing." Jack lowered his head. "I do not want to talk about it." "Oh, I know what happened. I just want to know the details." "What do you think happened?" "She took your hand and led you to a secluded place. She gently stroked your arm and face, while she made it seem like she had never hurt you. You believed her, even though you knew better. Then she asked you to do something for her. It was probably something humiliating that you would never do in a clear mind. But with her touch, her look in her eyes, and her purring in your ear, you were completely powerless to say no." Jack wondered how she knew so much. It's a textbook example of male manipulation. Every sneaky bitch in town knows how to do it. "I'm so fucking pathetic." "No, you're not pathetic. You were ready to defend yourself. You weren't even going to go to the party. You didn't even respond to her invitation. I made you go. It's my fault." She continued, "What you don't seem to understand is that you are genetically programmed to help people, especially women. Once people like Tess understand that, they will use you again and again. It's like you have a flaw, but with the right woman, it's a blessing." Jack smiled faintly. "At least there is hope." "More than hope. You can be the person you want to be. You just can't be with her." Passing streetlights created deep shadows that moved across her face as she drove. Only her dark eyes and deep red lipstick remained unchanged. Somehow, Catherine became more attractive every day. Jack wondered how it was possible that the gas station girl could be so beautiful. Was it the clothes, or did something deeper change? Jack had just gotten into bed when he heard Catherine call him from her bedroom. "Jack, can you come in here, please?" She was sitting in bed, wearing the vintage nightgown he had seen earlier. She patted the bed and said, "Sit here next to me." He adjusted his boxers so he wouldn't be naked when he sat down. She took his hand in hers and examined it. She touched the scar near his wrist with her index finger, then ran her finger along the tendon to the end of his finger. "I want you to help me understand what's going on. Can you help me?" "Certainly." She smiled, turned his hand over, and examined his palm. "I saw Tess in action today, but I didn't understand why she wanted to talk to you. Can you tell me?" "Please don't ask about it." "Oh, Jack, don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." Catherine knew he would be easily manipulated, but it was only after she saw Tess's relentless attack that she realized how much he was under her influence. Catherine decided to destroy Tess's power with a little manipulation on her part. "Please, please no." "Won't you help me?" Catherine purred. Her voice was smooth as silk. She knew he would help. He had no choice. She gently rubbed her hand against his. Her eyes were focused on his hand, but she watched his every move. "I don't see how that can help." Jack felt like he was lost in a stormy ocean of emotions. Waves of desire washed over him. He wanted to please her, but at the same time he was terrified. Catherine manipulated him just like Tess. He thought he could trust her, but now he was no longer sure. "You're excited at the party tonight, aren't you?" He was silent. "It's okay, just tell me." She brushed a strand of hair away from his face. The feeling of her fingers on his face again caused his arousal to spike. "Excited. I am getting excited every time she touches me." Catherine smiled. "Well done. Now tell me what you were talking about." Jack was silent. "You're not helping me, Jack. You said you'd help me." "Tell me what she wanted." Her hand climbed up his leg. He continued to resist her gentle persuasion. "Oh, Jack, I'm only doing this for you." She continued to stroke his leg. Jack didn't want to divulge any of this to Catherine, but it was impossible for him to refuse her. He felt anxiety rise within him as he said, "She wanted me back. But she has Peter now. I don't understand. She thought I wanted her to have another lover. She said it would make me happy." The words came out of his mouth and panic struck him like lightning. His stomach knotted and sweat began to form all over his body. He stood up and said, "I can't do this. You have to leave." "What?" "I can't do this." The panic quickly subsided and his will began to recover. "Of course you can. I won't be used like that, and the only way I know to avoid it is to stay away from people who use me. You need to leave." "Tonight?" "No, you can find a place tomorrow." He returned to his room and closed the door. Catherine couldn't believe she was so wrong. She should have known he would be angry about being manipulated, and she knew his only defense was to push her away. That's exactly what he did to Tess. Now she's ruined everything. Damn, damn, damn. The next morning, Jack couldn't look her in the eyes. They passed each other at the toaster and coffee maker like strangers at a buffet. Catherine wanted to apologize, but thought it would sound manipulative. She said, "Do I need to go back to Arizona, or are you still going to support me?" Jack thought about the question. It didn't sound manipulative, and she needed to know. He replied, "I will support you." It was something he had committed to, but he still felt like a fool. She moved in with one of the girls from work that same day. A couple of days later, Tess knocked on the door. She burst in as soon as Jack opened it. "Could you hold your bitch?" She spat the words at him. She was wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Her hair was a mess, and she wasn't wearing makeup. He had never seen her so unkempt. "Good morning to you, too." "Don't give me that crap. Where is that little bitch?" Tess was running around Jack's apartment. "What's happening?" "Don't pretend you don't know. Please make it clear to me." He responded as politely as possible to contrast with her rudeness. That little bitch of yours started posting 6-second video clips of Peter making an idiot of himself on the internet. She started at a party and she's not going to stop. I'll rip her head off when I get to her." This explained their rapid departure from Mary's party. Jack laughed. "Couldn't have happened to a better guy." "To hell with you. I thought you of all people would sympathize with public humiliation. You're terrible. It's time for you to leave." With that, he pushed her out the door and said, "Say hi to Peter." She tripped on the grass and screamed, "Fuck you, asshole." Jack looked at her, stretched out on the grass. "You really are a sneaky bitch. How could I not notice that?" His expression showed that she understood. He was gone forever. He closed the door without looking back. That evening, Jack found the video on the internet. The humiliation was underestimated. It was bad enough that Peter cheated on Tess and tried to steal Jack's girlfriend a second time, but he was completely unaware of what was going on. He took Catherine's grim smile as encouragement and rudely insulted everyone and everything. But the saddest thing was that the videos captured the real Peter. The thought of Peter being humiliated made Jack smile. Of course, Tess was also humiliated by the association. He wondered how long it would take her to find someone new, and then decided he didn't care. "I think Mr. Lonely Heart at table number 12 is in love with you," said the new waitress. Catherine replied, "I would be so lucky. He's here every morning, and he only sits at your tables. I think he's really into you," she hummed to an unrecognizable tune. Jack was there every morning to check on her, just like he promised. Every morning he reminded her of what could have been. Every morning she prayed for a second chance. When the morning bustle died down, she sat down opposite him. "More coffee?" "No, thanks." "What time do you want to leave tomorrow morning?" It was the end of her probation, and the parole officer wanted to see her in person. In 2 days, they would no longer be involved, and she would probably never see him again. He picked her up at 10. She looked as good as he'd ever seen her. A white sweater covered her arms, and a short skirt allowed her legs to be seen. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She tried to be as cheerful and attractive as possible. They listened to the radio for the first hour, then Catherine's phone rang, and she turned down the music to take the call. She talked for a few minutes with a guy who wanted to ask her out on a date. She was polite but hesitant. Not even 5 minutes later, her phone rang again, and she had a similar conversation with another guy. "You're popular now." "Probably. It's funny, just recently I couldn't get anyone, not even my own sister, to pick up the phone. And now attractive guys call me day and night." Jack smiled sadly. "You've come too far." They drove in silence for several minutes before her phone rang again. This time she turned it off. "Remember the conversation we had in the car after we last saw the judge? You were worried that you couldn't be the man I needed." "I remember." "Well, you were there for me. I wish I could have been there for you." "Why would you want to be around me? I'm a white knight. I don't need saving." "You know that's not true." Jack rode in silence. He wanted to leave his problems behind. Catherine thought for a few moments. Today was her last chance. She had to use it. She had been trying to figure out a way to discuss their relationship for the last couple of months. Despite this, she was here, improvising on the last day. "Tell me what happened, Jack. I thought we were doing well. We were a team at a party, but I made one mistake, one well-intentioned mistake, and now it's goodbye forever. Was it so bad that I played with you? You liked it when Tess did it." Jack didn't want to have this conversation. He said, "I'd rather talk about your inexperienced sex." "No, you can't say that. Everything that happened to you is buried. All I see are the consequences." She didn't let him answer before she continued, "How long will I have to wait until you find a way out of your dungeon? It will take forever if you don't admit that you're in a dungeon." He understood what she was getting at, but didn't know how to respond. "Would it really be that bad if I helped you?" "I don't need your help." "Oh, that's right. You were great with Tess at the party. You'd have her wrapped around her finger right now if I hadn't ruined it for Peter." He knew she was right. But you just wanted to take her place. No, I didn't want to. I just wanted to know what was going on. I just wanted to get to know you better. I wanted to be closer to you. She continued, you can search for 1,000 years and never find someone who feels for me the way I feel for you. If you have any feelings for me, you must let me in. She put all the cards on the table. It was a gamble, but she decided she had nothing left to lose. Jack knew he had feelings for her. He was surprised at how lonely he felt after she left. How could she leave such a big void in his life in just a few months? He replayed their conversation in his mind. She didn't touch him, didn't ask for his help, didn't look at him with big doe eyes, didn't speak in a soft voice. If anything, she sounded a little desperate and shrill. He said, you really ruined Peter. Tess kicked him out. Now she has a new boyfriend who no one likes. I feel a little sorry for Peter. He was just a pawn that we all took advantage of. Perhaps you did him a favor. Catherine nodded. He probably really did feel better. Were you as effective in your revenge? Tess did not like to discuss anything related to her sex outside of her consent, but she replied in a spirit of general confidence. No, he died of prostate cancer several years ago. Jack was sorry he had asked. He fell silent. When they arrived in Court's sight, they checked into the same room at the same motel where they had stayed earlier. They walked hand in hand from the motel to the best restaurant in town, which was actually a bar with decent food. Jack chose the quietest table and ordered their best bottle of red wine. He implicitly offered her what she asked for and hoped he wouldn't regret it. The waiter poured the wine, took their order, and then left them to their privacy. She raised her glass and said, tomorrow you will be free from me, and I will become an independent, self-sufficient woman. For independence. Jack touched her glass with his glass with a slight sadness in his soul. I'll also finally be able to kiss you, she said with a big smile. Too many kisses, said Jack, clinking his glasses again. Catherine folded her hands on the edge of the table. She spoke directly, without visible emotion. Do you want to tell me here, or would you rather wait until we get back to the motel room? Their table was private enough for a private conversation. Let's get this over with. Jack poured himself more wine and drank it in one gulp. I wasn't being completely honest with you. After I caught Tess and Peter in bed, she caught up with me before I could leave. She spoke in that voice of hers, stroking my head, arms, and hands. She told me how I was. It's important to her how much she loves me and that she can't live without my help. Part of me knew that this was all nonsense, but there was another part that wanted to believe her. I remained like the fool that I am. The first time I caught them, I surprised them by coming home early. The second time, she wanted me to catch them. She didn't even ask Peter to leave. She just looked at me from underneath him and said she'd be there soon. We'll finish, and she has something important to talk about. Catherine didn't want to hear the rest, but she was fascinated by Jack's terrible story. She came out of the bedroom naked. She said she knew I was horny. She said I needed to stay with her because that's who I am and nothing will change that. She made me kiss her and have sex with her. I could smell and taste him all over her, and it went on night after night. I put up with it for a couple of months, and then we moved out after a few months. It wasn't sex Yersty liked. No, that's not true. I could have just gotten up and left. That's exactly what you couldn't do. You were powerless, and she took advantage of it. That's sex without your will by any standards. Jack refused to accept that this was the case. No, I was just weak. I let her do it. You sound like a victim. Jack thought for a moment. He didn't accept it, so he continued his explanation. Anyway, back to you. You called me into your room and told me where to sit, just like she would have done. You touched me the way she touched me. And you purred softly, just like she did. It took me back to that moment when she was in bed with him, asking me to clean up after him. I was filled with anxiety. I just had to push you away. I'm sorry. Are you sorry? I'm so sorry. The waitress interrupted their apologies with jalapeno poppers. Jack stuffed a whole pepper into his mouth, hoping the pain would be a distraction. She said, "I'm sorry I asked you to talk about this." Jack felt the tension release. "Now you know my kryptonite." "Yes, now I know." She also gained a much deeper understanding of the white knight who cared for her that night. From there, the conversation moved on to lighter topics. Over dinner, they discussed her work at the diner, the problem with the starter on the Falcon, and some home improvements Jack was hoping to make. On the way out, Jack grabbed another bottle of wine for his motel room. He put his arm around her shoulders and said, "I have one more thing I want to say. Before the night I found you, I thought about Tess 60 times an hour. Since that night, I've thought about you." With that, Catherine was sure that she had him back. She was delighted. Jack opened the door for them to enter. He didn't even have time to take 2 steps inside before she rushed at him. She rolled over so he was on top and looked into his eyes. "Now that you found me, what are you going to do with me?" "Ah, yes. The eternal question is what to do with a beautiful girl lying on your bed. For centuries, scientists have pondered this question." They exchanged smiles. Then he touched his tongue to her lips and traced the arc of her mouth with the tip of his tongue. He kissed her eyebrow, then traced the ridge of her nose with the tip of his. She felt his hot breath on her face and smelled the jalapeno from dinner. "You're trying to torture me, aren't you? After everything you put me through, I think you deserve it." She lifted his shirt over his head, then tensed up to kiss his neck. "Are there any rules for tonight?" She started to say no, but stopped. "Just one thing. I want you to touch every part of my body with every part of your body." Jack laughed. "This might be a little awkward." "Well, you asked." "Of course it's my fault." Remainder in the evening they had sex. Her face lowered to his, and her lips enveloped him in kisses. She lay on her side, throwing her hand over his chest. He lifted her hand and examined the tattoo. "I hate my tattoos." He ran his finger along her arm. "This one says, 'I don't love myself, so you'll never love me,' and the other, 'I'm stuck in the past.' Smooth, but they have one advantage. This is where the glue sticks strongest." He grabbed her hand and held on tightly. She kissed him on the cheek. "Well, they're no longer relevant, but if that's where the glue holds, I'll keep them." The next morning, they met with her bailiff. They talked briefly, and then he asked her to sign some documents. A few minutes later, he said, "Congratulations, your probation is over." As they got into his truck, she asked, "Can we go to the place where we first met?" "Of course," Jack said, turning east. It was a beautiful autumn day in the desert. The cool morning air began to give way to the afternoon warmth. Jack drove with his elbow hanging out the window, just like they did in the days before air conditioning. He crossed the median and stopped the truck in front of the volcanic cones. Catherine stood next to him, taking photos of them together. In a few days, she'll change her profile photo to one of her kissing Jack on the cheek and him smiling like a fool in love. Her status will read, "Not single," and her photo caption will read, "The happiest place on earth is 21 miles east of Quartzsite." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.